Good evening. We're picking up where we left off on Friday. Jigstraw, congratulations on being first. So yeah, we're doing pretty well for ourselves. We're playing through on hard mode. Not my first time playing this game, but it is my first time playing this game in a long time.
What are you looking to buy?
Now, I could really go for a lot of potions,
Right?
so
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you.
There's something that I definitely found while I was going to the castle earlier. Is that I get hit a lot. And I don't currently have passive regeneration, so... I get her legs pop off. Yeah, all things considered, hopefully I do a little bit better for myself today. My muscle memory will hopefully have settled in a little bit. I do know that, like, down the line I can get a passive shard that gives me health regeneration. So I'll be looking forward to that. Assuming that I haven't just outright misremembered what the passive shards do. As you can see, I'm basically in the entry hall, and I'm already at like 25% health. But it's all a ruse. In fact, I will now lock in and take no more damage. Ever. Except for that one. And that one. This is fine. Now the good news is, I did pick up this mace the other day. So it is doing more damage than the sword that I started with does. Come to think of it, I think that the woman over there, I think I can turn in the quest that she gave me.
Got any targets for me?
Here's what I've turned up on the Good work. Here's your reward.
Ring X3 Uwu.
Got any targets for?
Here's what I've turned up on the monsters.
I like how these are all just like, avenge the death of this person that I love.
Help my little sister Rosalie rest in peace. Kill those murderers dead!
Have you learned any?
Here's what I've turned up on them. Help my cousin Annette rest in peace. Kill those murderers dead!
There's a very common through line in the things that she asks you to do. Oh. Ara ara.
Have you learned?
Here's what I've
Tell
turned
those
up on the
murderers
monsters.
Uwu. Ara ara.
Help my neighbor Lisa rest in peace. Kill those murderers dead!
Have you learned?
Here's what I've turned. Help Dr. Simon rest in peace. Kill those murderers dead!
It's like that one meme where it's like, if you kill a killer, the number of killers stays the same. So you shouldn't stop at one. Oh. Doku, welcome. I'm playing a game that totally isn't Castlevania. That's just next turn. He really snapped after Dee Dee blew up his lab so many times, I guess. Okay, if I just hold right, I'll arrive at a room with a couch. And I won't have to worry about getting sent back to the other room with the couch. I like how I'm unironically taking most of the damage from just bats. Which at least in my head would be like the easiest thing to handle. My health is low. Oh, that works. Now the smart thing to do would be to use a potion here. Wait, did I? Oh, I must have loaded the save before I actually bought the potions. Whoopsie. I'm in danger. I like how the one time I was actually going to use a consumable, I didn't have it. These things happen. Okay, I will purchase potions, I will take all of those quests.
Hello.
Then I will save
What
my
are you
game
looking
again.
to buy? Is this right? Then we have a deal. Thank you. Got any
Here's what I've turned. Good. Here's... Help kill.
Have
Help
I kind of wish that I could just accept these all at once.
Help
But it's
kill.
barely an inconvenience not to be able to do that, so it's fine.
Here's what... Help kill.
Right, and let's save this again. As a teenager, you always wanted a giant globe like the store lady has. Globes are pretty cool. I feel like my opinion of globes has kind of like followed a bell curve over time. Like when I was a kid, I was like, wow, globes are really cool. And then like I grew up a bit and I was just like, oh, why would I ever want a globe? I've got like, you know, an interactive globe in my phone. And now I'm kind of sick of like technology being shoved into everything, so I'm just like, I want a globe. Just a sphere with the world printed on it. I don't need to like sign into anything or download anything. The most accurate, but least useful kind of map depends on how good your eyesight is. And how high resolution the globe itself is. I still love the kitty. Mostly because it's a kitty. Alright, not doing too bad. Here it is, the Bloodstained. It's actually kind of hilarious what you do with this fountain later, but I won't spoil it. Is that why the pants are red? Probably not. His only weakness, moisture. Scale armor. Fire defense, lower int and mind. I kind of need the defense, honestly. I don't really have an abundance of attacking magic at this point in time, so... Gift shard. Thank you very much. Also, yes, Miriam does have quite nice thighs. I almost thought that was dead. Well, there's no almost about it. I thought it was dead. I almost stepped into it. Alright, so... Oh, that's cool. It shows on the map where my quest targets are. That's really nice, actually. Oh, there's a frog hidden in the rock. How much force was in that arrow that it sent me up and over a stone block that size? It's kind of crazy. Yep, RIP scale armor. It's okay, I'll get better stuff. It is inevitable. It's only a question of when. My thought process was basically, oh, I'll finish up that dog quest. No, I agree. I really like this, the aesthetic of this game. I really like how it, like, uses light. Like, I feel like a lot of games, like a lot of art styles in general, like, underestimate, like, how good emissive light can look. Like, you mostly only see it in, like, cyberpunk type settings, but, like, you can make it look good just about anywhere. Oh no? Oh, I think not intentionally, but I think I blocked his arrow with my water thing. Moko leek and Moko oil. Need a warhorse key for that. It still amuses me that, like, you learn new skills by having a shard the size of you just impaled into you. It's like, yeah, alright. That fits. I'll just put it with the others. Okay, if memory serves, I don't have what I need to get through here, which would explain why I didn't get through here. But I will try to keep it in my mind that there's an Iron Maiden there. I'm pretty sure Iron Maiden is the term for that thing. Yes, cool. I thought so. But I was like, is this one of those times where I think I'm right, but I'm not? It's like, it's really embarrassing if you say something thinking that you're right and then you're not. Or at least it is for me. Nice HP up, we take those. Figure that? Yeah, that was a gargoyle. It probably turns you to stone. That's usually what I see gargoyles doing in, like JRPG type media. Yeah, I think I could drop down there and get something, but I don't know if I could get back up without having to climb all the way around. So I think I'll abstain from dropping down there right this very second. Orbital wheel. Create a defensive barrier by spinning your spear. It's literally just spin the D-pad. I like that. Oh, awesome. I was really hoping to find one of these. This is fast travel. So now I can go from here to that other one really, really fast. Which means that I can save and not have to fight all my way back to where I was. And like I could also, you know, restock and so on.
Have you... Here's what I've turned up on the monsters.
Still need to kill more dollar hammers.
Good. Here's... Good.
Brigandine.
Here's... Good.
I like how pausing just cut the jingle off entirely. Okay, there we go. Brigandine has some nice stats. Also, my normal mode completely blind save file was about 12-13 hours. I'm kind of wondering how my not entirely blind hard mode save is gonna take. Because it wasn't entirely a cakewalk, the first time around. But also I think I'm just like more skilled in general now, so who knows? I still like how that guy's death rattle sounds like a guy stubbing his toe. Oh, fine healing item recipe. This feels like it's probably a boss fight.
Stop right there.
The Oblivion Guards, they found me after all these years.
I knew what you are. That ghastly air about you. You reek of sorcery, Shardbinder.
Ah, and what am I to make of you?
I like his boots. I like his torso.
Me? I am your executioner.
I like his vibe. Ow, that was all of my bones at once.
Game over.
I like how he taunted me. I'm pretty sure that was his narration going, game over. If I was at full health, I could take 2 hits, so... Honestly, I've put up with worse. Mostly from FromSoft games. Let's just patch that up. I'm gonna try and make it to him without taking any damage. Because I do want to save my potions. I actually kind of appreciate it when a game, like, limits how many healing items you can carry. Because it makes it feel less like cheese when I, like, use consumables to get through a fight. Like, for example, when I was playing Samurai Remnant, I basically had infinite rice balls past a certain point. So, like, whenever I was in a difficult fight and I just, like, ate rice balls through it, it kind of felt less like I was being skillful and more like I just had rice balls. But this means, like, you get to carry 9 potions. If that's not enough, too bad. Oh cool, there's a save point right here. Even better. That makes the run back even easier.
Stop right there. Cruise opposition.
There has to be a faster way to access your potion inventory. You just let them personnel me twice for no reason. He nothing personnel twice, missed. I don't think there's anything he could have done that would have farmed more aura in that moment than that. He's like, I could have killed you this many times. Foolishness, Dante. Oh, that's all my potions. I'm not the world's most appreciative of his ability to, like, spin and attack instantly. Like, there's probably some tell for that, but I haven't identified it yet. This is fine. I am glad that I found that HPF. I wonder if any of these, shards would be particularly better against him. It doesn't seem like that difficult, all things considered. I just have to not get caught is all. He definitely has a range advantage over me. I wonder how difficult it would be to, like, slide under him when he jumps. Like that. I found a dime. That means I can't possibly lose. That was dumb. If you think about it, I've got twice as much health as I need. And then there was none.
Better than a demon pawn.
No better than a demon pawn. Excuse you, I'm at least the bishop. I should probably be shooting magic at him, just because he's so dangerous up close. And I'm dead.
I will cut down all demons.
You know, this really feels like the kind of guy where I could be like, hey, kind of feel like we're on the same side here. Like, no, I'm the other shard finder, the one that isn't a demon summoner. And he'd be like, wait, there are two of you? I'm in danger. Not sure how I got through that one. Oh. And now his sword's on fire. I like how it doesn't actually do any more damage.
Demons.
Like that quick swing of his has always done 85 damage, so he appears to have just set his sword on fire to aura farm, which I can respect, honestly. Not a great start. Ow. Now that might have looked like I was throwing just to restart the fight faster,
Demon pawn.
but in fact I actually just got bodied, so... I just need to get better. Like, this fight doesn't at all feel, like, unreasonable. I just have to consistently not, like, put myself in positions where I can take damage. Or I wonder if there's a way to bait his attacks.
Game over.
I definitely feel like I'm missing something. I could just shoot him. That is an option. I can take maybe one more hit. I can take no more hits. I have lost my face privileges.
Demons.
These things happen. You know, it occurs to me that right in front of this boss fight, there was a drop that let me craft better healing items.
guests.
And I'm starting to think that perhaps if I had some better healing items, I might have better odds. Like, obviously they're not mandatory, but it would probably help. Yeah, I'm gonna go talk to my alchemist friend.
Cut down all demons.
See if he can make me, like, better potions. I'll walk up to him like, potion seller, I'm going into battle. And he'll be like, Miriam, must you do this bit every time? And I'll be like, yes. And maybe I'll actually manage to save my game with True Arrow equipped. Do I have anything for or from you? Still gotta kill Dula Hammers. I should probably go out of my way to do that, because she might not give me new quests until that's done. And I'm not just saying that to delay getting my butt kicked more.
Hi, Miriam. So, what'll it be?
Oh, hi, potion.
I'll go with this.
There, all done.
I could do a flamberge, that would give me more range. I could also spend that 8-bit coin that I've got. I'm pretty sure these are all like crossover weapons. I don't necessarily recommend or recognize all of them. Is there anything that I could prepare with what I've got on me? Doesn't entirely look like it.
Oh, about the castle. It may not be much help, but let me tell you what I know. The castle itself was summoned from hell, demons and all.
Alright then.
But the site it rests on is where the Alchemists Guild once lay. So you may find traces of our facilities intermingled with the rest.
Now that you mention it, I do remember seeing an area dedicated to the study of Eastern mysticism.
Yes, and another of us was researching how to create giant organisms. Anyway, just be mindful of the facility's existence. The knowledge may keep you out of harm's way while you explore.
All right. Thank you.
Alright, so it's part hell, part alchemy.
I have some... What are you looking to buy?
The high potions are expensive.
Is this right? Then we have a deal. What are you looking to sell?
Though I suppose I could sell shards like she wants me to do.
Is this right? Thank you. Is this... Thank you.
I don't want to drop any of my quantities to one.
This... Thank you. What are you looking to buy? Is this right? Then we have a deal. Thank you. Come back anytime.
Alright, so... Now I've got my basic potions and one singular high potion. Also, I think it might be cheaper to, like, buy small potions and then combine them. Because I think it would be, I think it'd be 600 gold to buy 3 potions and then combine them. And then 1,000 gold to just buy the high potion. Though, of course, there's the convenience fee involved. Actually, that can't hurt either. Maybe I'll also drop down on that other chest. Like, maybe it's something that'd be helpful here. I also do still need to try and kill those Solahans. What's-her-face also gave me rings, which might be useful here. Ha! Stone mask. It's like, is this a good idea, I wonder? Oh, do some of these occupy different slots? That would explain some stuff. Like, it makes sense when you say it out loud. Mithridae. Blunderbuss. Lethal boots, and that had the vibe of a wall you could punch through, but I guess it wasn't. I'm pretty sure those boots are a different type of weapon, yeah. Did you miss we beat the boss? No, we did not. Basically, I was like, oh, you know what? There was like a book full of like upgraded healing item recipes. What if I went and I got one of those? And then I grabbed some other stuff and fiddled with my gear a little bit, and maybe I'll accomplish something. I'm not really deep enough into the game that I have an abundance of options. So I think I mostly just have to get good. But I'm okay with that. I'm willing to get good. I remember when one of my friends played this game. He used a mod that made it so that every enemy that could drop a shard would. Okay. I think I'm doing and taking one less point of damage. It's actually kind of funny how little that is. But you know, maybe it'll be the thing that tips the scale in my favor. I wonder, will that horizontal slash consistently miss me if I'm right up in his face? Because if so, that would be pretty cool if I could tell when he was going to do that as opposed to like a horizontal one. Or vertical, I should say. I didn't even want the dime. I broke that sconce for the love of the game. And then he slammed me through a wall. I did get True Arrow again. And I actually managed to save it this time. Oh my days. This is fine. Surely those extra few hit HP won't be the difference between winning and losing. Okay, so it's looking like True Arrow's not gonna work here. Hitting him in the back point flank does seem like it would work. I think he'll just automatically parry them though if he's not in that stance. Still, it's a thought. That's like 3 hits with the mace. I found 2 dimes. I'm unstoppable. Wait, that's fine. Ow, my bones. Okay, that was...
All demons. demons.
That was going pretty well up until I exploded. I'll give it one more shot, then we'll take tonight's 5-minute break. It would be nice. I'll thank you for the
Stop
hit
right
dance. It would be nice if, like, using the water magic, like, extinguished his sword, and he was like, wait, no, that's not fair.
Kurosako's foolishness.
Unfortunate.
Game over.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break here. Please use this time to refill your beverage, go to the bathroom, anything that would take you about 5 minutes. I will see you shortly. I returned. Oh, thank you for the rotation and the hydration. It'll give me the power that I need to defeat Zangetsu. Thank you for the apples. Ow. I'm not blaming you, but the apples did distract me. Yeah, except for the part where I got exploded, I feel like I was doing pretty well that time. I feel like this would be a lot easier if I had, like, a dash. I got the backstab, but I don't know if that's quite what I'm thinking of. Oh, whoops. I can probably take one more good hit from him. Yeah. I was correct in my assessment.
Cut down all demons.
I low-key wonder if the backstep isn't better than I've been giving it credit for, and they're like expecting that I've been using it. Because in my head I'm just like, oh, no iframes, but like... I kind of need just a little bit better, distance making. Though it is a little bit bothersome that he so consistently gets me on the backswing. I'm gonna do a falling aerial and then backstep as soon as I can try. I think there's like a stun period where like Miriam has to crouch down to absorb the impact from the fall before she can backstep. But I'll try that a couple more times. it might be possible. I think I just have to hit the button after I've hit the ground rather than before. Yeah, maybe. I can probably take one more good hit, 2 more light hits. Higher damage spells. The only one that comes to mind maybe is... maybe Thrashing Tentacle? I'll try it. Oh, thank you for the extra copy of True Arrow. Have I tried any of the summons? The summons are more like projectiles than anything else. And I'd rather keep using my, my water ball. Okay, Tentacle's 120 damage if it lands. It's expensive, but like, if it works. In terms of like projectile spells, I think True Arrow is the highest damage I've got. I should save after making modifications to my stats. I think I remember getting walled by this guy pretty hard on my first playthrough. I think after this it gets a lot easier just because the toolkit expands. Like, this is one of those guys that would be not as bad if you had just like a little bit more mobility kind of deal.
All demons.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, a little bit rude of him to assume that I'm a demon, but like, Miriam's default outfit does include a couple of demon horns, so like, she can't really blame him for getting a... She can't blame him for reading a sign that she put up. Okay, positioning matters for that. Those explosions are hard to dodge. Which, to be fair, is probably the point. I got some hemp. Perhaps I could beat him if he agreed to be tied up prior to the fight starting. That's the sort of thing that, like, Dante from Devil May Cry would do. He'd be like, yeah, sure, hit me with your best shot. Then, like, wait for you to, like, agree that you've done everything in your power to restrain him, and then he just, like, flex his muscles and break out. Just to be a dick about it. I'm trying to make out the design on the back of his jacket. It looks almost kind of like a high school mascot jersey. At least that's how it comes across to me. I'm just thinking, what else could I do to prepare for this fight? I could go back and kill some Dullahans, and like maybe the quest giver lady will give me another quest that I can do that like has a reward that is something that would be like good for this fight. I definitely think that like I could get him. Like I've had a couple of like really close attempts. But also, like, tweaking the numbers further in my favor can't be a bad thing. Okay, so Tentacle can hit twice, but if I could hit him 3 times with the Cerulean Splash instead. I'll try Summon Rat. Okay, not bad. Not bad at all, actually. I like how the rat just explodes into more exploding rats. Oh, I got him. Nice.
Cease this at once, Zangetsu!
Ah. Here we go.
My controller is disconnecting and reconnecting. Luckily, it didn't do that like 10 seconds ago.
How many times do I have to tell you? Our enemies are the demons and those in league with them.
And I say, what is the difference? The alchemists were the gunmen, the shardbinders the gun. All must be dismantled.
In the case of the alchemists, you are right. They coveted the powers of hell and must pay for it. But Miriam is not like them. She is fighting for us, at great personal risk.
Really? You forget how many of our friends perished for similarly misplacing their faith.
And do I look as weak? Look closer.
I was bored with her anyway.
Do your job, Zangetsu. You need to put a stop to Alfred.
And I will. But you listen to me, Shardbinder. If you value your life, then stay out of my sight.
He reminds me of Solid Snake. He's got a voice like he's gargling gravel.
You can hold me to my word, Dominique. But don't presume to tell me what else I can or cannot do.
Such an edgy lad.
I apologize for my acquaintance. He had no right to speak to you like that.
Pay it no mind. I've been through worse.
I want you to know that I trust you, Miriam, and nothing anyone says could ever sway that trust.
Well, you have my thanks. It's nice to know that I have someone on my side.
Zangetsu is a demon hunter from a land far to the east, in the tumult of a decade ago, perhaps even longer. Demons robbed him of everything precious to him, and he's despised everything to do with them since. His strength, however, is second to none.
I mean, I did just beat him, so I mean, perhaps second to one.
I saw it for myself. I could tell he was holding back, but he was a handful regardless.
Maybe it was a lack of conviction that dulled his blade. Well, I'll be off then. I mustn't leave Anne alone for too long.
Like, I shouldn't be too sassy because it was like 20 to 1. But I did beat him, so... And like, that's the timeline that stuck, so... Let's just save the game and lock in that win. Imagine if I died to that guy and had to go back and refight Zangetsu. That would suck. I am indeed entirely out of potions, but I think I'll be alright. Oh, hey, waste them. I do still need to kill Dollahammers. Or Dollahammers. I need the thing that moves things to move that thing. Yeah, if only I had a giant hand. We're going to a whole new zone here. Dionsec Cathedral. And I got killed by a killer barber. If only there was something in the name that would indicate this outcome. Yeah, potions would be nice. Oh well. Unfortunately, I kind of don't have very much money, so... I will have to make do. Though I really ought to try to remember to go back and, oh, hello.
Oi, wait a minute. Are you human?
Sorta. What up?
What does it look like?
I'm not sure. Your body is covered with weird decorations.
Yes, but these are all the rage in Paris.
Oh, Paris. Wow, I've never been to Spain. The name's Benjamin.
I like how her first thought was to try and pretend to be French.
I'm Miriam. Benjamin, you shouldn't be here.
Actually, I wonder if she is French. Huh.
I know, but I'm so scared I can't even stand up. Damn, I just want to go home.
Do I have any items that could help get him home?
Dora the Explorer. Have a waste them.
This will help me escape.
Yes. Picture your house, and don't let go of that thought.
All right, I'll try it.
I think it worked.
Ooh, that's a gold. We take those.
Come, answer my call!
11th hour. Deflect physical attacks. That's probably the attack that Zenketsu is using with his katana. Ulfbert's sword. Alright, upgrade, we take those. Also, just aesthetically, I kind of like swords. It doesn't do as much damage as the mace, I guess depending on their defense. But it swings faster, so it's probably more worth it overall. Either way. Beyond Sect Cathedral. And he's dead. Critical swing. It's basically a Hadouken with a whip. Alright. That guy looks ominous. That guy's name is just straight up Demon. He dropped a sinister heart. Huh. Anyway. Skill shard. Okay, so that one's a passive. Left trigger. Oh, hello. That's probably how I, Oh! Shortcut is a passive ability, okay. No, wait, sorry, skills and passes are two different things. Okay, okay. That's kind of mental that I had to unlock that. Normally that would just be like a game feature. Oh well, it is what it is. Yeah, so I could like quickly switch between loadouts. That's really cool. I don't think I ever took advantage of that when I was playing through this game the first time. You know, I was mentally comparing her to the witch from Left 4 Dead. And in hindsight, I feel like I was right to do so. Like, wow, it's probably a really bad idea to pick this fight. Given that she's not picking it for me. I bet the demon drops a really cool skill shard. MP max up there, gotta keep that in mind. I wonder if I can just do a sneaky past her. No, I cannot. Well, maybe I could. There probably wouldn't be like a fast travel thing right there. Yeah, if it was like Dark Souls curse, it would persist through death, which would suck. This lion having crystal horns reminds me a little bit of how yokai are depicted in the Nihil series. Where they're covered in crystals. I can... oh, okay, that works. What might be through here? We are back in the entrance. Alright. Gotta be careful not to fall. Oh. Looks like it's gonna be another skill. Oh, did I not grab the other one? Whoopsie. I guess you just get them in like whatever order you find them. That's interesting. I guess I better go back and get the other one. Shoot, okay. I think I might have to drop down from up there, but I don't recall exactly. I like how it was clearly some sort of fire demon dropped curry powder. That was a lot of damage. Alright, I'll try that again, but I'll try to get the first passive shard, or skill shard rather, on the way up, rather than having to double back for it. Speaking of shards... augment intelligence. Nice. I believe right now I'm mostly using, like, strength. Like, if I started having more of, like, a focus on spells, that would definitely be a shard I'd want to either equip or level up. Okay, skill shard number 1. I can damage boost between, or through, rather, what's her face? Or you just run through her, with no need for shenanigans. That also works, apparently. Ooh, 50 gold. Nice. At least I presume that the currency is called gold. Okay, if I get a second one of these, what is it? Let's find out. Okay, it's just another level of shortcut. Fair enough. Okay, then if I drop down from here... It's literally just here, okay? Maybe there would have been something on the left-hand side or the right-hand side if I'd, like, held a direction. I think I want to head back there, so... It probably makes the most sense to come through here. And that was actually
Here's what I've turned up on the monsters.
an opportunity to kill some dollar hammers. Oh well.
Help kill those.
We'll just take more,
Here's what I've turned.
more quests
Help
anyway.
kill them. Here's what I've help kill them.
It amuses me to think that, like, she's
Help kill them.
giving these quests, like, as she actually remembers their names. She's like, what was that guy's name again? Oh yeah, Dan. Avenge Dan.
It's good to see you. So, what'll it be?
I think if I create this weapon, it's not the work of the swordsmith Kuninaga. I think at that point it's like the work of this guy. Unless they just mean that, like, it's his design.
Alfred was your master, wasn't he?
Former master. Why?
I don't know. I was just wondering if you remember anything about him that I don't.
Fair enough. As I recall, he was studying ways of drastically slowing down objects. He was a genius, to be quite honest, but I have no respect for that now.
Why not?
Because he fought against sacrificing you right to the final moment. Only to change his mind like a coward.
I see. Thank you.
So in my experience, if you want to slow something down, just, like, look at it while you'd rather be doing anything else. You'll fit, like, an entire year into the span of, like, 5 minutes. Can't go through to the upper right without the giant hand thing. Longsword. Not as good as my Ulfbear sword. Passive from him, whatever that might be. Dagger and rapier damage, we take those. Yeah, the one that I'm pretty sure exists and that I would really like to see is health regeneration. Like, it doesn't really go fast enough to be like particularly useful in boss fights, but for like exploring, it's incredible. I like how all of his limbs just pop off. The like little rolly goat thing. Actually, that's probably a lion. It's got like goat legs, but I think the face is a lion. Oh, I recognize those panels. Those will come into play later. I love the kitty. Like it's called Nyawan. The kitty's okay, I just gave it a bath and it left him down in outrage. This is fine. Oh, dance mask. You wonder how cat girls feel about paths? I'm pretty sure that's a depending on the writer thing. And I'm dead. Rip. This is fine. This is fine. I like how the cat technically wasn't even attacking, it was just like getting mad at me and igniting me with the sheer force of its outrage. Which I'm pretty sure most IRL cats like think they can do. Yep, dance mask.
A demon!
Wait! I'm a good killer barber!
Uh-huh.
Butchers and cutthroats all say as much.
I like how in the background there's a portrait of Dominique.
I'm not a cutthroat. I've never cut anyone. Well, I have, but these scissors. They've cursed me to become a demon.
Then why not cast them aside?
Cast them aside? If I could take them off, I wouldn't be cursed. Duh. The name's Todd. And the only way my curse will be lifted is if I barber my way through 666 different hairstyles.
Well, why not just make the hairstyles up then? Lop a little off here or there.
Ah, there's a penalty for sloppy lopping. If I don't give my patrons good haircuts, the scissors kill them dead.
You have the worst curse ever.
Yes, quite literally, yes. Please, can you help me find information about hairstyles? I'll cut you for free.
That is not an enticing offer.
No, not cut you, cut it. Wait, what are you even worried about? You look like you could rip me into 100 pieces.
I really could. All right, you have a deal.
I enjoy that, like, she agreed after he was like, you would dumpster me? She's like, yeah, I would.
So, Liz, shall I take a little off the top?
Interesting. I don't have that many options, I think, but... I can at least try to make her look a little bit more Fox-like.
The look suits you fine.
Excellent. It'd be really funny if, like, after using him 666 times in a playthrough, he was just like, thanks, and left. Wonderful. Fast travel.
Here's what I've turned up on the monster.
Right, I think we're gonna call it there for the night. It's a little bit early, but it'll probably be a little while before I see another save point or fast travel point, so this feels like a decent break point. So yeah, let's call it there. Next stream is going to be on Wednesday. The game is going to be Yoshi's Island for the Super Nintendo. The next time that I'm playing this game in particular is going to be on Friday. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful night. I hope to see you again. I think Henri is streaming. Streaming? What? I think Henri is streaming, so let's rate her. She's doing... Oh, she is doing streeting. She's doing Street Fighter. I said the wrong thing by accident, but it ended up working out. Alright, have a wonderful night.